of the Parks, Recreation, Human Services, and Public Safety Committee. On the committee, we have Lydia Cephadawson, and we have sitting in Council President Susan Honda. Excuse me. Our new committee member is Greg Baruso. He's our new council member, but he's out of town, so we'll have to proceed without him. So thank you. Call the meeting to order, and now we'll have public comment. Is there anyone here for public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to committee business. Yes, I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda to add Ray Gross as item G to speak about coronavirus. Is there a second to the motion?
I second.
Thank you very much, okay?
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed. Motion carries. Thank you so much. Now we're moving on to the approval of the February 11th, 2020 minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I approve the minutes for February 11th, 2020 as written.
Thank you. As presented. Thank you very much, Letty. I appreciate that, Councilmember Cephadawson. I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. So now we're going on to item C, Mirror Lake Park Playground Replacement. Ms. Gerwin?
Actually, it was PAC.
It's
You want to go to-
PAC, item B.
PAC was B.
Did I miss something?
PAC.
Oh, I'm sorry. Monthly report on the PAC operations. I'm sorry. Grissette. Thank you.
Good evening, Council President and council members. We are here to discuss our February 2020 events and revenue. On the report that you guys have in front of you, you can see that we hosted a total of 12 usage days in February, which is the same year over year from 2019, as well as we had Seattle Women's Choir, Foursquare Church, our Arts Youth Program, Federal Way Symphony, the Doo-Wop Project, Federal Way Symphony Winter Concert, and then the State of the City address rounded out the end of the month. We also hosted the Greater Federal Way Chamber Luncheon and a Sweet 16 birthday party. In addition, some miscellaneous revenue that came in February was rental of part of our parking lot for driver training. And then on the second page, total number of events, February year over year, 15 last year, 13 this year. And then you can see that we had a total number of tickets sold of 1,298 with gross ticket revenue $27,977.04 and gross rental revenue of $35,267.75. And food and beverage, we brought in $5,606. Upcoming events are Glenn Miller Orchestra, Joan Osborne and the Weepies, the High Kings, and Menopause the Musical. Currently, all PAC events will be operated. There is no current cancellations for PAC-hosted events. Is there any questions?
Council, are there any questions? Councilmember Cephadawson.
Yes. My question is, when you have these revenues, does it take out the expenses?
It does not.
It does not.
No.
So then what is the actual revenue then?
We will be at FedRAC in 2 weeks with those actual expenditure numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Council President?
Thank you. The Federal Way Youth Symphony rehearsals that you talk about at the bottom of your report,
Yes,
how long does this contract go for?
until 2023. So we have about 3 more years left on that MOU.
Are there any other groups that have this kind of a contract?
No.
Okay.
You know, thank you very much, Council President. What I would like to see, it's hard for me to I'm trying to get a handle on exactly how our revenues and expenditures for the PAC for the year. And I can see that if you add up the total gross ticket revenue, that's just the gross, and the gross rental revenue, with the gross food, I can see, but I don't have the expenditures.
We will be at FedRAC monthly
that's gonna
beginning
be
in
at
2
FedRAC.
weeks. And that will show not only 2019 yearly, but we'll be able to report monthly on financials. And that'll show a total overall net income or loss.
All right. So do you have a feel yet for, based on last year, what the net income or loss will be for the coming year?
For
It's only-
2020,
Yeah.
not at this time.
You know what other thing I would like to see? Excuse me, I have allergies. I don't have a feel for, we have these different rentals, and I don't know what each rental is renting for. I'm just curious what the revenue and expenditure would be for each event.
You're wanting to see each event's revenue and expenses broken down?
Uh-huh.
That is something that we can look at bringing to FEDRAC as well with our reports.
That would be very, very helpful. That'll give me a feeling for what's going on, how, what our return on investment is, whether we need to. We aren't having that many events, really. And whether we need to increase our revenue by increasing the events, dropping the price for some, increasing the revenue for others. I mean, the expenditures for some. I just, because right now the upcoming events, we're only talking about 3 more in March.
That doesn't include any other rentals. The upcoming events that we list when we come to these meetings currently is just PAC-hosted concerts and or events.
I can
So
see that.
any personal or private rentals wouldn't be listed on there because some of them don't want to be advertised. But I'm happy to adjust the report and in future months showcase what upcoming rental numbers look like as
Right.
far as total usage days for the following month.
That would be helpful. Also, I'd like to know, for example, for the Glenn Miller Orchestra and the Weepies, the High Kings, the Menopause Musical, I'd like to know what the ticket prices are.
Absolutely.
At some point, you're going to have the price, the price of the ticket now, but how many tickets were sold and what the expenditures were for each of those events.
So all of those are in our monthly financial reports that are currently submitted to finance
Okay.
and submitted at FEDRAC as well. We'll go in more depth starting in 2 weeks at FEDRAC, and happy to do that for you guys.
So the only reason I'm asking that is that I'm concerned at the end of the year how much we're going to be losing and how we can avoid losses to try and anticipate the loss and try to ameliorate that in some form. It may be by adding more events. Maybe some of these events are more profitable than others. Maybe we need to, I'm trying to see here, was there one wedding on here?
We haven't had any weddings currently this year. We do have weddings slated for later on this year. In regards to profitable events and stuff, our general manager, Brian Hoffman, can speak to that a little bit more. Brian Hoffman is with Spectra Venue Management, who's in
Okay.
charge of running the PAC, dealing with the day-to-day contracts, ticket sales, and rental revenue.
For example, for weddings, we've just had a bridal event. And do we have a presence at those?
So we used to do the Seattle wedding show, but the return on investment wasn't there in regards to the number of brides that wanted to utilize the Performing Arts and Event Center based off the setup. However, I know that Spectra is going to the Tacoma wedding show. That one is April. We can find out the date for you, but they chose to, based off of total cost investment for the wedding shows, Tacoma Wedding Expo in years past shows a better return on investment than Seattle Wedding Show.
I don't know, we're a new facility, and if we want to attract weddings, we need to be out there letting people know we're there. We may have to do that at a loss leader in the beginning, but, not showing up because it may cost too much, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but maybe you can explain that to me later. I'm just worried about, cost versus expenditure.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we're happy to report on that in greater depth at FEDRAC. I think we'll be able to dig a little bit deeper into some of those numbers that you have questions on, and happy to forward those to you as well, those reports.
Thank you. Are we going to have another presentation?
No.
I'm sorry.
She has a question.
Councilmember.
So do you, right?
Huh?
Go ahead.
Okay. Are you finished?
Mhm.
Is there any word on naming rights?
No, currently at this time, there are none. Again, as we continue to report, our biggest goal and objective is to have more events, have more people in the building so that there's greater return on investment for these potential naming right partners.
Okay. So are you able to tell us if there's been anyone that's been interested in naming rights?
At this point in time, no.
Okay. And one other question on the public art that is at the PAC. I'm a little concerned about that. So my vision of the public art, the pictures we saw was that we'd have the columns with the pretty tiles on them, and then there'd be tall grasses,
Mhm.
and it's just weeds. So are you guys responsible for that, or is it?
Very briefly, we had a presentation last month to the Arts Commission and working with the Parks Department in regards to that. So I'll let Autumn expand on that as to what the plans are for
Okay,
that.
thank you.
Both Jason Gerwin and myself met with the Arts Commission last month to discuss this very topic. It's a concern to us as well. I mean, we see it every single day and are trying to figure out the best way forward. I'd be happy to share that with you and set a time to
Okay.
go over that presentation with you. We went pretty in-depth on what we've discovered and how to move forward and create a similar vision that the art project was supposed to have.
Okay,
So I'll send you an email and schedule that with you.
okay, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
And one more question. Are there a lot of people that come to the window to buy tickets at the PAC? Or do you do most of it online?
I would say a majority of our tickets are sold online or over the phone, about 93.8% based on the data that we have collected since Spectre took over.
Okay.
That is online or over the phone.
I've thought for the last year or so, if we had during certain hours, the ability to sell tickets here in this building for events, if that would increase ticket sales, if people knew that they could come here if it was closer for them.
It would be a little difficult because it would be setting up a remote kind of access over here. We would have to look at our ticketing system to see how that works. I don't, and then having a printer, so it might cost additional monies to have a printer and something like that if somebody were to come over here. Our box office currently is open Monday through Friday, 10 to 5, and we continue to analyze that to see if we close the box office. Unfortunately, the ticketing contract that we have, it's not like a phone bank, so all orders that are called in go directly to our box office, so we would have to have somebody there anyway.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you very much.
Councilmember Sabadasan.
Thank you. With weddings, I know as someone from Ethiopia, we do have big weddings, but we always have to have our own, I think, food. And I know that's not okay, but I wonder if we can have a buyout policy like some hotels do, to where then those different ethnic groups would come and use it for weddings?
So we do that on a case-by-case basis, exactly of what you described. If we don't have, from our 165 venues across the U.S., an executive chef that has the experience or expertise in that particular food item, then we would work with the client to have a buyout, so to speak, where an outside caterer would come in, utilize our equipment, utilize the kitchen, but that would be on a case-by-case basis if it's exotic or different type of cultural food that's not on our everyday menu.
Okay, thank you.
Also, we have graduations coming up. Do you do anything with the school district?
We do one graduation with the schools. We are limited in that we have 716 seats, and most graduations, if you have 300 to 400 students and at least 2 people per family, Federal Way Public Schools has come to us, but we don't quite fit their total audience in our theater, so they're still utilizing Showware Center.
Okay. Any other questions, council? Thank you. Well, we look forward to your expanded report at the FedRec meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving forward to now we're going to item C, Mirror Lake Playground replacement equipment. Gerwin.
Good evening, committee members. Thank you for having me. The policy question before you is, should the city issue a PO to KCDA for the supply and installation of the Park Commission selected and committee-approved playground equipment for Mirror Lake? And so there was a staff memo attached. I do need to point out there was an error on the original agenda bill that is corrected for next week in the council member, but I erred on the total in option 1 to reflect the memo. That total should be $997.57. So the memo you have is actually the correct number there. And so I did want to show you a few pictures on the monitor to make sure you understood the scope and locations and what we are doing. This was selected with input from the community at Red, White, and Blues festivals, at a couple open houses, and then at Parks Commission meetings. And then Parks Commission also was part of that selection. But what you're seeing on the screen now is an overhead of Muir Lake Park. And the red box is kind of going to be the new area. Unfortunately, I should have put a red box around this area, if you can see my mouse moving. And that's the existing footprint for the big toy that's in there. And so we are replacing the big toy in that existing footprint, as well as adding amenities. And so the reason we're doing this is because this is the closest neighborhood park to the Uptown development, and so it's kind of would be that housing closest neighborhood park, and so we wanted to expand that with as many people that we have in that housing development. And so this is kind of what the Public and Parks Commission selected. That's the big toy that will fit in the existing footprint. The one difference you will notice is the Zip Cruise is so popular at Town Square Park that they weren't happy with just having one. They said the fun of the Zip Cruise is having two side by side where you can race your friends. So this picture is not accurate, but it will be a double racing, and you'll see a better reflection on an overhead on that. This is kind of just the opposite side view that shows you those apparatus. What I can tell you is we meet all of the ADA standard components, and IPMA standards. So that's kind of blueprint. And this is kind of a drawing. It gives you a better look at the layout. And so the existing area is where the big toy will be, the double Zip Cruise, and then the other is a double bay swing set. And so in that swing set, you'll have one bay with two standard belt seats. And unfortunately, I don't have a picture with me, but on the other bay, we're putting in what they're calling the new reflection swing. And so it's, if you can envision the old tot swing that you drop your little child into, this is that same sort of swing, but it also has a belt swing that the adult can sit in. And so they will face each other as you swing, and it is particularly shown developmental capabilities for autistic children and people of special needs. They get that interaction and be able to see their mom or their dad's eyes as they're swinging. And so it's would be the first one we have in our park system. And so with that being said, the budget is all part of the playground CIP budget, which is funded through REIT and utility tax. And so we have a total of about $263,000 from the memo. We're asking for 109 to be allocated through this discussion, and we will have a remaining balance. I do want to make sure you're aware that not only does that account our replacement for our playgrounds, but it is also our repair and vandalism budget, and our playgrounds do get a fair amount of vandalism and abuse, and so we are constantly making repairs on the existing to make sure they are all compliant and within standard. Do you have any questions?
Councilmember?
Yeah, with vandalism, what do they take?
It's not what they take. Well, they do take stuff, but it seems that a lot of people have extra time on their hand and they just dink with it. And so the myriad of vandalism we've seen is burn slides, carving, tagging, vulgar items put on there, some homeless issues in some playgrounds at certain parks. And so some of the worst things you can imagine, and you've got this big toy for kids and the community, and why anyone want to wreck it or damage it, I have no idea, but there seems to be a group, and it's not just specific to Federal Way. I mean, it happens all over that parks get vandalized, and it's too much time on their hands, and they're showing off for their friends or they think it's cool, and it costs us in municipalities a lot of money.
Council President?
Are you done? So this playground equipment is made for what ages?
It's 5 to 12 age group.
And is there anything there for under 5 besides the one swing you were just?
It would be the swings. Now, they rule playground equipment in the 2 to 5 age bracket or the 5 to 12 age bracket. And so I currently have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. When my current 5-year-old was 3, she wouldn't play on any of the 2 to 5-year-old equipment. And it tends to lose its play value quickly. Additionally, a lot of what's available, kind of spring toys and that, tends to get vandalized a little bit more. And so everything we've got here, although age bracketed for 2 to 5, or 5 to 12, I'm sorry, a 2 to 5-year-old is going to be able to play on it. Now, are you going to have them go down the twister slide by themselves? No, but that, you wouldn't expect a 2 or 3-year-old to be at that playground by themselves, and adult supervision is required for all these playgrounds, but whether that always happens or not, I can't say.
So this park is the park that people talk to me about?
Okay.
Because of it's so isolated?
Sure.
And in the photo you showed us, there's a lot of tall trees around it. Is it gonna stay as isolated as it is now, or are some of those trees gonna be?
Well, and so we have had a couple volunteer groups with the Junior Air Force ROTC out of both Todd Beamer and Federal Way High School, and they've been working on limbing up and doing so basically limbing up the trees and kind of taking down the shrubs. I don't know that we can ever truly eliminate kind of that, I forget the word you used, isolation of that park, because it is truly in a built-out community, and our access points are so narrow. They're essentially street ends are your access points for this park. And so what you do see is you see a lot of traffic through that park in the morning and the afternoon, parents walking their kids to school. The play equipment that had been there was kind of neglected and beat up, and it just had lived its useful lifespan. And so we're hoping now with this new equipment, they're going to walk through, but they're going to stay a little bit. As soon as you start getting the people you want in the parks, it generally pushes the people you don't want out. And I think this playground is going to do wonders for bringing people into the park.
Okay, will there be a ribbon cutting or anything?
That has been undecided at this time.
Okay, that might be fun, just to
Okay.
bring attention to all the new things there. And
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'll bring that up with John.
Okay, awesome, thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries.
So is this the park that's sort of between a row of houses? It's kind of just in.
So it's off between 10th and 8th, and so it's really close. It's within a block of Muir Lake Elementary School, and so if you were to turn in or to drive to Muir Lake Elementary, you'd go down 10th, and instead of turning into the school right hand, you would make a left-hand turn. Well, actually, it depends on what street you're coming from, so don't follow those directions. That was not Google. But yeah, it's basically the opposite side of the street of 10th that Muir Lake Elementary School is
I
on.
think I know where it is. So I was worried about the trees and the seclusion. That would be a real concern. But I also worried about some of the equipment, like the zip line. Do we have a sign that we put up that says "Use at your own risk"?
Oh, all of our playgrounds, and it's actually part of so NPSI is National Playground Safety Institute, and we have several staff that are CPSI, which is certified playground safety inspectors, and so that's a requirement that signage is out. We have stickers that goes on all the equipment that talks about the age group, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate.
Okay.
Stickers, they don't stay on, they get peeled off, but we do go put those off, and we do inspect our playgrounds on a quarterly basis.
Thank you. And then you mentioned that the utility tax was part of the,
That's how that CIP account is funded, a portion of utility tax and a portion of REIT.
yeah, I'm just trying to determine, do you know what the portion of the utility tax is?
I believe it was 50,000 in utility tax, both in 19 and 20, as relates to the budget.
All right, well, thank you. Any other questions? All right, is there a motion? And the motion should say to approve the award for $109,997.79, correct?
57. It's 109,
Oh, okay.
997,
57.
and 57
Okay,
cents.
thank you.
And it will be on, it is corrected on the agenda bill that you'll have for council next week, so that error won't
Thank
be
you.
there, and I do apologize
Thank
for
you.
that.
But
Okay.
it doesn't have the amount, so it doesn't, it's okay, the way it's written.
That's the amount right there.
Not our
Oh,
recommendation.
okay, go ahead.
All right, I move to forward option 1 to the March 17, 2020 consent agenda for approval.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank
Have a
you
great
very-
evening.
Very much, Mr. Gunnar.
Thank you.
All right, we're moving on to the next item on the agenda. That is item D, 2020 Human Services Commission Work Plan. Sarah Richford, thank you.
Good evening. I will be talking about our 2020 Human Services Commission Work Plan. Our commissioners would have been here, but in light of COVID-19 and making those choices, they're not here this evening. So the 2020 annual work plan focuses on the two bodies of work that the commission oversees and makes recommendations to the council on. Those two bodies of work are the Human Services General Fund and the Community Development Block Grant Fund. So over the course of the year, you'll see both grant evaluations, reports, annual action plans, items of those nature. 2020 is largely focused on the evaluation of grants for the 2021 through 2022 Human Services General Fund grants, as well as the CDBG Public Services for that same time period. Most of the commission work will be focused on preparing for that evaluation. They have a series of trainings around equity and funding, as well as the evaluation itself, moving into recommendations that will come to City Council in the fall, and then going into the CDBG Annual Action Plan work for 2021. It's the kind of standard cycle for CDBG and Human Services even year work program. Do you have any questions that I can answer?
Council, any questions? Any questions? All right. So may I hear a motion?
Thank you, Sarah, for the work, and looking forward to the upcoming human services application process, right?
Yes.
All right, I move to forward the proposed 2020 Human Services Commission Work Plan to the March 17, 2020 consent agenda for approval.
Thank you, and I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Now we're moving forward, again, Sarah, with the 2021 Diversity Commission Work Plan.
Great. In the 2020 through 2021 Diversity Commission Work Plan, they've broken down their work into 4 different categories. The first of which is to gather input that will guide the work, having a visible and relevant presence in the community, visiting or inviting individuals and groups and organizations to the commission, and seeking and responding to potential actions, all that serve the mission of the commission. And the mission of the commission is to advise or support city government to ensure Federal Way is a community that is united in this diversity, where everyone is equally respected, valued, needed, and cherished. Equality is not sameness, it is equivalent value. So that is the goal that the commission is working towards. Per conversations that were had between staff, commissioners, and city council last year, and maybe even the year prior, they are wanting to move in a direction of policy. So we're going to be bringing the community forums, different conversations out in the community, and really focusing on that, along with the events that support the visible and relevant presence in the community, which include the MLK celebration, Flavor of Federal Way, the book drive, among others.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions? None? No questions?
Oh, yeah.
Council President.
So the community forums, when I was on the Diversity Commission, we did one, or maybe we did 2. They're hard to do, and they're hard to get the public, the community
Yep.
there. And I know this is something that the commission's been working on ever since I left the commission. What's going to be different with this? How will they get the public to attend and be part of these?
I think the approach is actually looking at more naturally occurring groups and events that they can go that are connected to the mission of the Diversity Commission. And they are also going to be working as part of their, they call it a retreat, sorry, I was struggling for that word. As part of their retreat, and they're engaging with a group that has done policy work, but does a lot of that community-facing conversation work. And that has been something that the commission has really spent some amount of time on, is the forums are difficult. So how do we make this be a successful way of engaging with the community? They've completed surveys in the past. That is still certainly something that we could look at, that the ability to have a conversation and in that face-to-face venue is quite helpful in the work that they're doing. So they're going to look to those naturally occurring events and groups and try to partner with them in order to have these conversations.
Do you know when the retreat is?
It was supposed to be last weekend, but with the council interviews, they have currently tabled that, and we have to find another date.
Okay, thank you.
Copain.
Sarah, I have a challenge for you. I think the next time you start a sentence with the mission of the commission, you should wrap the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
If you would have allowed that, I should.
Sure, we allow it.
You have a commissioner who can join you.
All right, do I hear a motion?
I move to forward the proposed 2020-2021 Diversity Commission Work Plan to the March 17, 2020 consent agenda for approval.
Thank you very much. I second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you. Well, Ms. Bridgeford, you're still up for the item F, 2019 Program Year Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, CAPER.
Hello again. I will be presenting on our 2019 Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, also known as the CAPER. This pertains to the Community Development Block Grant Program, or CDBG. And it is a report that reports to the U.S. Housing and Urban Development on the annual accomplishments that the city achieved using the CDBG funds. So the CDBG program works to provide decent housing, suitable living environments, and to create economic opportunities. The city's program year runs January 1st through December 31st. In 2019, the city expended $793,671. We assisted 397 persons. The majority of the CDBG funds were used to assist very low and low income persons. We did also have some people who were up to that 80% area median income, but we do focus on those lower income brackets as well. In 2019, there were 5 home repairs that were completed. I'll just say that as a reminder, we received our funds quite late in 2019 as we had in previous years. I think we had our signed agreement in maybe September. So we don't expend a lot of those funds or have projects that move forward until later in the year. So we also have 3 home repairs that are proceeding currently in 2020 and should complete soon, that they are 2019 projects. 8 businesses were created and 2 expanded. 20 businesses and individuals received technical assistance. An acquisition was completed of a single-family home. That acquisition was in partnership with Fusion, so they purchased the home to be used for transitional housing. One family experiencing homelessness was able to access that housing in 2019. 221 persons with disabilities were provided assistance for classes to help them live independently. 92 individuals received critical assistance to prevent homelessness, and that was via rent assistance with the Multi-Service Center. 55 people received employment training and placement services. 38 of those people were placed into jobs by the end of the program year. Some are continuing service as well. And then 2 infants received critical care after being drug exposed. I would note a couple other projects that are underway. As you may recall from previous years, our CDBG capital projects oftentimes don't complete or even start in the program year of those funds. One such project is with Villa Capri. A contractor has been selected, and that is moving forward, so we will see that complete in 2020. Habitat has home repairs in the neighborhood revitalization strategy area. That's an area in North Federal Way that was council approved in 2016 and HUD approved in 2016 as well. And they will be doing home repairs specific in that area. We will also have a street lighting project in that area as well. And those are some of the projects that you would see go forward in 2020 that are from prior years, in addition to our 2020 projects. The process for the 2019 CAPER began with a public comment period on February 14th. It will close next Tuesday on the 17th at 4 p.m. That way we can present council any comments that we might receive. There was a public hearing at the Human Services Commission on the 24th. We did not have anybody provide comment on the CAPER at that time. And then it's here for your consideration this evening, hopefully moving on to council next week. We will submit the plan. Per regulation, we have to do that by the end of March. I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Council, are there any questions? Go ahead, Councilmember.
Thank you. So one question, and I don't think you have the answer, but the homelessness prevention for 92 persons.
Yes.
So Multi-Service Center and a lot of the agencies that we work with have to see a 10-day vacate notice or 10-day notice before they would even consider it, right?
Yes.
And then with that, not everybody gets helped. So is there a way, or do we even follow that same process with this fund? And or could we modify it so that they don't have to have that 10-day, which perpetuates actually eviction?
Yes, it's my understanding that I think all of our agencies that provide this type of assistance, including the assistance provided with CDBG, do require
Right.
some kind of notice. I know that there is some conversation around, what does that look like? Multi-Service Center, and I would need to follow up with them. I think it might have been Multi-Service Center that talked about the potential of having more flexibility with their policies. Other agencies may as well. It's certainly a conversation that we can have on an ongoing basis. With CDBG, this isn't exactly about the notice, but I do think that it kind of gets to some of the reasons why requiring a notice can be problematic. CDBG and HUD are now requiring housing counseling, potentially go with it if you're doing anything beyond the assistance. And Multi-Service Center has been willing to at least engage and look at the potential of training. This is something new that's come up. And what that does is it allows the funds to then be used for some light additional services, things like budgeting, looking at ways that a household and a family might be able to access other services, employment, other income, ways that could prevent the situation more directly in the future.
Council President, any questions?
I do. Along the same lines as Council Member Sefadosson, do you know how many people or families we were not able to help with rent assistance?
I do not know that, no. And not for that program, but also not for our general fund. We provide more general fund dollars for this type of work than we do CDBG.
Do we, so we helped Fusion with the acquisition of a single-family home. Will we be helping Fusion? Have they asked for any help with the shelter for families? Or are you
Not
expecting
with
that?
CDBG. So the thing with CDBG is we have a cap on that public service, and we provide those funds on a 2-year basis. 1-year contracts for CDBG that they come along with the recommendations for the general fund. And that's 15% of our annual allocation can go to public services. And so it's a limited pot. What Fusion was able to do with the house, because it comes from the capital side, which is the majority of our CDBG funds, they were able to access those funds. They don't need the capital resource at this time for the shelter, so that wasn't a request that they had submitted for 2020. Certainly with public service dollars, that could change in the future, what would be allocated.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Copang, do you have any questions? Okay, thank you. Sarah, could you tell me, the kitchen at the PAC, where do we report that to CDBG?
It's not reported with CDBG. It's not CDBG funds. Those were state dollars and not something that came through community services.
So maybe I'm saying this wrong. Didn't we borrow so much from the CDBG funds
That was for the PAC as a whole with the Section 108 loan, not specific to the kitchen. There was a kitchen grant that was a separate.
But weren't we, with that CDBG funds, didn't we promise that we provide so many jobs?
Yes, and we do actually report on that. It is one of the areas, there is a narrative in the report that reflects that we are low on the jobs, which we did anticipate in moving to Spectra, and just with the ongoing operation, that as the PAC increases events and really works to get that solid foundation for their events, that we did not anticipate a significant increase. We continue to look at the second parcel, which is where the majority of the jobs would be coming from, and that's an ongoing conversation
Are
that's
you
being
talking
had.
about the Target property?
The hotel property. Yep.
Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate that. Are there any other questions, council? All right, let's see. Did we have, oh, goodness, is there, yeah, there's a motion for this, isn't there?
Yeah.
Councilmember Dawson.
I move to forward the proposed 2019 Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report to the March 17, 2020 consent agenda for approval.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sarah,
you.
very much. So Ray Gross is coming to the podium, and Ray is our emergency manager. I may have your title incorrect, so introduce
correct.
yourself. Okay, and you're going to tell us all about coronavirus.
At least what I know of.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Sure thing. So again, my name's Ray Gross. I'm the emergency manager for the city. So good evening, council president, council members. I have kind of a long list, so feel free to stop me at any point if you have questions. And I'll just get into it. I'm going to talk about the city actions that we've taken, and all the details I may not be able to answer because there's still fluid out there, but I should give you a good concept about what that activity is. So initially, the city has proclaimed a state of emergency, and that's to help us in the event. It's just staging the trigger in the event that we do need to make emergency purchases, like we need this stuff now, as well as some additional emergency powers if and whenever they're needed. Dovetailed into that, the Federal Emergency Management Agency has put out a little bit of guidance about cost tracking. So there is a potential that we might recover some expenses toward this. I know Finance has set up a project code to help in that arena. Parks is also tracking lost revenue, which I believe is in maybe the low thousands of dollars right now. If this thing continues to percolate, that's probably going to grow. Some other things we've done, we stood up what's called the Outbreak Advisory Team. So that's management team and other identified key staff, of which Sarah is one, because one of their top priorities is ensuring that homeless people are factored into our planning. A lot of the other activities kind of jumped out of this advisory team, and various departments are working on bits and pieces of it. The key focus is basically ensuring timely and accurate press releases and informing our community of various actions that we're doing. Ensuring that city staff and our community residents are always a top priority for us to ensure their safety as best we can. And then again, homeless being part of our top priorities. Another big chunk that we kind of completed is our continuity of operation planning. So that just identifies key personnel and leadership positions, as well as identifying essential services that each city department is tasked with. And are their staff cross-trained? So if the normal everyday person that does that job, if they are taken out of action, there's someone cross-trained to kind of step up into that essential function. Because the directive we've been given is city functions are to continue to function as long as possible. So we've kind of put a lot of thought into that. Some of that, just looking at the guidance from King County Public Health, which is a lot of what these actions are based on as well, is looking at particularly the parks maintenance staff, public works maintenance staff, our finance staff, and the police department. They've kind of broken these people up and assigned them to various different facilities, so there's not cross-pollination between these groups. In the event that someone gets exposed, and since we have this long 14-day potential infection where you can be non-symptomatic but still potentially infect others, we just figured this is probably the best way. If one group goes down, we still have 2 or more other functions that can still carry out some of those, whether it's public works, parks, police duties. Legal has, along with finance and HR, have been hammering out what a quarantine policy looks like for us. So in the event that a city facility has to be closed and those people either ordered by public health or self-quarantine, how do those people continue to get paid, or what payment options are out there? The governor had a very interesting press conference today that addressed a lot of that. So it's getting worked at the state level as well as here at the city. There was a lot of discussion about what is an essential meeting for city government to continue functioning, and a lot of discussion about what a non-essential meeting is. Some of y'all have been engaged in that conversation, and so we're just following King County Public Health on that, and that is, the current actions are in place at least until the end of this month, and it's going to get reevaluated by the Outbreak Advisory Team. That team presently meets right after management team, so every Monday of the week, we follow management team and have a meeting. With that, depending on, there's going to be another press conference by the governor tomorrow, and there's going to be a conference call between the mayors in Snohomish County, King County, and Pierce County with the governor's office, probably preceding the press conference. There's probably going to be a big announcement, decision made of something of pretty significant magnitude. So I've kind of put the warning out to our Outbreak Advisory Team that we might have a meeting tomorrow to discuss the implications of whatever comes out of that conference. Let's see here. A lot of work on payroll and how that would work. You know, can we actually still cut a physical check, or is it all electronic? As well as looking at off-site possibilities for that. And I know some of the finance staff have also been assigned to other areas. I think that's still being worked out. A couple other important things that we're doing, we're keeping our local partners informed. So South King Fire has had a good amount of contact with our police department and how they don and take off personal protective equipment, what kind of equipment they need, particularly if they know there's a potential infected person that they're dealing with. Valleycom has some procedures to help prevent what happened up in Kirkland. So, let's see here. Sarah typically attends a webinar that focuses on homeless. When I attended the first one of those, it was very heavily on the providers of service to the homeless, how to protect them, and also identifying the key points that serve as kind of a contact point between the homeless and services provided. That's where information gets out to the homeless, at least that's the majority of the way. So just making sure I have captured everything here. So that's my list, at least everything that I can remember at this point.
Thank you very much, Ray. Council, are there any questions? Go ahead.
So if a person experiencing homelessness gets infected, or what happens? Where are they placed?
Well, they would still go into the medical system, okay? They do have to get a doctor approved to get tested. After that, and I'm guessing here, the place that's set up in Kent is gonna manage some of that. But I'm not exactly sure fully on the details of that, but that place, and I know they're looking at a couple other temporary facilities to address that concern.
Okay, can I ask another question? So to that effect, Kent and White Center are the two locations right now that are
That is correct.
identified. And so how do we know, or would we know if there's any possibility that Federal Way would be identified as a location?
Well, looking at the current method, we will probably find out very much like Kent did
After the fact.
after the fact. I can follow up and get that answer to you, but yeah, when we attend these webinars, that was never discussed in those webinars, and I think that will be the continuation pattern of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What's your name? Council President.
So I have a few questions.
Sure.
Just stop me when you want me to stop. Are we going into our homeless camps and monitoring those who are experiencing homelessness?
I want to say at present, that has been scaled back to only essential, either police or public works, essential call-outs for those, either because there's an imminent danger to something. But yeah, I want to say those visitations have been pulled back by city staff. I don't know about other providers, what they're doing.
Okay, so we would hope then that if someone who's experiencing homelessness isn't feeling well, they would go to the ER or seek out help.
Ideally, if they're using services, they're gonna get information, like if they go for showers, they'll get information there about the symptoms of COVID-19. And then if they are getting sick, they get put into the medical system.
Do you know how many people in Federal Way are diagnosed? Or perhaps how many have been tested and are waiting?
All I am presently aware of is 2 confirmed cases, and both of them have been announced either by King County Public Health or in the Mirror. One was at the U.S. Postal Sorting, and the other one was the lady that had traveled and came back. Those are the only 2 that I'm aware of that are confirmed cases.
And no one in our schools has been.
I'm unaware of that at this point.
Our assisted living facilities with the recommendations not the recommendations, the requirements that the governor put out today.
Well, I don't know about today. Last week, I spent a good portion of my time going out to visit the larger ones. Most of them are complying, if not exceeding. I don't know about the stuff today, but they're all posted with signs. A couple of them have everybody who enters get their temperature checked. I'm 98.6, just for those who are wondering. But yeah, they have the signs up. We've had contact with them. And so I'd say right now, they're taking very proactive measures. I have been in contact with the Life Care Center that's here in Federal Way. They had some questions about fire and EMS, so I let the fire chief and their emergency management person know, and hopefully that contact has been made to address their concerns. But yeah, as of right now, I'm pretty engaged with them, just because that is an identified vulnerable population.
Right.
So I think they're taking reasonable and very proactive measures.
It was somewhat alarming I think there's 9 or 10 assisted living facilities up north that have been identified with cases, which isn't that much of a surprise, but it's still shocking because it's awfully scary for the public.
It
and
is.
for those that are in those facilities. If quarantines were made mandatory by the governor, how would we react as a city if if someone needed to be quarantined because they were positive? Do you know how that would work?
So so mandatory quarantine of a few individuals, or?
Correct, like, let's say I had it and I was, instead of a voluntary quarantine, it was mandated that, we don't know what the governor's gonna say tomorrow, but we
Exactly.
expect something very significant.
Yes.
So how would that look?
Yeah, so I can't speak exactly how the police department's gonna respond to that. Listening to the conference today from the governor, Western Washington has been pretty compliant to the voluntary quarantine, self-quarantine. So as long as that pattern holds out, it might be just everyday kind of phone contact with them. And again, it'll probably come up I know it's on our agenda, an item to discuss at the next advisory team, just exactly how the police would help that. And if it gets down to it, it would be a governor call if there starts to be like civil disobedience to that mandatory quarantine, and that could possibly bring in state resources. But as of right now, I don't feel comfortable speaking how the police will approach that.
Okay, I didn't know if cities would be responsible for that or if the state would.
Well,
or the
it would,
county.
I would say locally, it's going to be the city's responsibility to help enforce that. It might be bolstered with resources from the state, whether State Patrol or National Guard, something along those lines. But initially, probably the bulk is going to be placed on the citizen themselves. Secondly, kind of just an observation, ensuring compliance, and it'll just scale up from there potentially.
And one last question, our seniors, we have quite a number of seniors that use our community center, and they eat lunch there, get their meals there.
Yeah, so the food service, if I understood what Parks told me, maybe Steve can chime in, the food service that the city helps in, that's been canceled. The Meals for Wheels still uses the kitchen, but as far as I know, they deliver the food, so seniors are not coming in to the community center or wherever that kitchen is. I'm guessing the community.
That is correct.
Okay. So that's still going on to some level.
All senior and inclusive programs were canceled today.
So I'm really concerned with the seniors that we need, that used the services, especially for lunch, and that they're getting food. Is there any way that, as a city, that we have any way we can reach out and contact them? Is there a list of folks who were coming in that the staff knows about?
We can research that.
Okay, I am really
I'm
concerned.
assuming the Meals on Wheels is covering that, but I'll double check on this.
I'd appreciate that, thank you. And thank you very much for being here, Ray.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Councilmember Copang.
Thank you, Chair. Ray, a few questions, and happy to yield the floor at some point if somebody wants to jump in with other questions, but I do have a few. Emergency powers, emergency purchases. What are the items that we're thinking about as emergency purchases? What kind of budget do we have for those purchases? And what is the likelihood we could actually get them if we needed them based on the runs we've seen on vital supplies?
Yeah, so I want to say this is still kind of in the discussion phase, but talked to the police today. This is after South King Fire gave them some training on how better to protect themselves and the equipment. So they have the gloves, they have the mask. A couple of things that South King Fire recommended are some kind of safety goggle. So just regular safety glasses are fine, as well as the disposable medical overalls.
Okay.
So we found a couple sources that have them in stock. The minimum order for like the gowns or the overalls, 10,000 overalls is the minimum order, but they're like 15 cents a gown.
Sure, okay.
The safety goggles, we found them in good quality or quantity as well as a reasonable price. So probably, it's not gonna be, it falls under the,
Sure.
the just a normal everyday threshold. So probably just on order them normally. We should get them, because they're not being, gobbled up like toilet paper and that sort of stuff.
So basically, we're looking at personal protection equipment.
Yep.
For the service providers, having direct contact with the community.
Yes,
Okay,
and
all right.
not speaking for the parks, but there's been discussion about expanding the janitorial service, only because of high-touched areas,
Right.
maybe getting those touched during midday, cleaned, as well as cleaning supplies. And we just figured it's probably prudent to maybe have a janitorial service do it versus asking city staff to do it, because there's, for untrained, I know this is gonna sound a little weird, untrained people to know how to professionally
Sure.
clean and then potentially expose themselves, whereas the janitorial staff have been through bloodborne pathogen and all that. So those are kind of the things that, at least as of right now, are being considered for
Good.
purchasing.
That was, okay, good. And I think one of the questions I was going to have, which I think you've answered, is we have some more rigorous protocols in place for the community center and other city properties to ensure that they are being disinfected on a regular basis. I think the virus actually lives for a couple days, so on a hard surface, which is kind of not customary for a virus. So,
Correct.
all right. As far as emergency powers are concerned, what do we envision as emergency powers? I think it's a pretty broad term. I think the community should have a little bit more definition around that.
Yeah, so, again, they sound kind of ominous. Some of the lighter ones are the being able to suspend various contracts, various purchasing restrictions. These are the normal ones that this stuff, the proclamation is used for. It does get into talking about commandeering of community resources all the way down to the individual citizen. So if there's a private practice doctor, they can get commandeered, most likely at the county level, but this goes all the way down to the local executive head. There's various curfew measures, a lot of public health, so cities kind of bumped out of that one. But yeah, I want to say those are the big ones. Restriction of travel is another one, as well as, the restriction of travel kind of goes hand in hand with restricted to your residence.
Okay. How would that be broadcast?
Some of it might get broadcast tomorrow. So ideally, it will come from the governor's office or the local public health officer, because those are the two main leads right now.
Okay, so I think much like a snow day for school.
Somewhat.
Okay, all right, okay. A more general question, I think there's obviously a lot of attention being given to the coronavirus, but my understanding is it's essentially a version of the flu, and that the general population, if they're healthy, it's pretty low risk for them. In fact, extremely low risk for them to contract it. In fact, I've heard that people may have contracted it and not been symptomatic at all and just passed through their system. So I think really I think the main focus to my understanding, really should be on the at-risk populations, which would be the 60 and over, or 50 and over and in bad health. Is that what you're hearing as well?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right. Okay. Do you think the population is, Federal Way should be in a state of panic, or just, I think, a calm sense of purpose and protecting themselves?
Yeah, what I've been telling the residents that contact me, particularly it's a news story, I just tell them, look at the news story, take away the adjectives of that news story, and there you go.
Okay.
I would say there's no need to panic.
Okay.
All the health officials from CDC on down to King County Public Health saying the risk is extremely low.
Yeah.
The last numbers I saw, 80% of the people that get the COVID-19 either show mild symptoms or unaware that they're currently infected, up to, okay, it's gonna take you out for 2 or 3 days, you'll bounce back.
Yeah.
It's that 20% that's in that vulnerable population that you mentioned there, that it gets more concerning, particularly if they have more of those boxes checked. So if they're senior, if they have a chronic health condition, those kind of parameters, then it gets a little serious.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd say overall, not the panic thing. Public health, I want to say, is doing a very good job of keeping people informed.
Okay.
Out of the bunch of it, I'd say the media, maybe doing what the media does and spinning it up more.
Yeah.
But
Thank you, Ray.
you're welcome.
Anything else?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I know you have the, actually first, before that, Washington University in Missouri told students who went home to King County to not return to school. So there's even, they've gone to that extent. So now students can't go back,
Wow.
which is unfortunate. I like your question, Mark, and I'm not at all panicked or anything. It doesn't, I agree with you, except it doesn't have a vaccine. That's, I guess, the only really key difference. But one population that we're not talking about is apartment dwellers, because the units are close, you come in close proximity in every way, touching the bars, everything. So, and I don't know what the solution is to that at all, because if one of them contracts it, then of course the spread would be high. My question is around the Outbreak Advisory Team. I know it's internal staff, correct?
That's correct.
So how do you communicate with like St. Francis or any of the other hospitals, clinics, school district, these key public areas, as well as all the businesses in the community?
Okay.
What is our relationship with them?
So I'll start with probably our strongest. So we have what's called the Greater Federal Way Emergency Management Program. In that program, we have representatives kind of at the decision level from each of those agencies, which include South King Fire. So they have an emergency management person, Assistant Chief Dave Matafton. We have St. Francis, who's Kyle Jacobson. He's their emergency manager for, I want to say, several hospitals in the area. We have Dr. Pfeiffer, Paul Vang, and Cassie Swanson from the school district. And we have John Bowman from Lake Haven Water Sewer District. So those are and then we have Public Works and Police also in that group. We meet at least once a month. Prior to all this, we typically met twice a month, one day for kind of policy decision meeting, and then kind of a EOC training meeting. So we definitely are heavily engaged with those. Some of our crime analysts down in the police department, if I need to push something out to the apartments which I'm going to do tomorrow because had not thought of that, as well as a couple other groups that they have good contact with, so I can use that venue. I've asked Sarah and Tyler, because they have good plugins with nonprofits and the faith-based. So getting information out to those various groups that you mentioned, those are the venues and avenues that I would use. For just general broadcast, I try to funnel everything through Tyler, which eventually ends up in the Mirror or on the Facebook or city webpage. So I think we're doing a good job of hitting most of the groups that you mentioned.
Thank you. And one more, like King County Housing Authority, where I work, has a couple of facilities that are senior and disabled populations. And so I don't know if they're part of that conversation. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention as well.
Okay, I can look into that.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Anything else? Council President.
Thank you. So when your group is meeting here on, the city group is meeting, I would request if there's anything that council needs to know before the public needs to know, that we're informed before the public, it would be great. Or to even involve us in asking us questions or for help. We don't want to be left out. This is a big deal. And as council members, we're out in the community, we get asked a lot of questions. And if we're not in the know, we don't know what's going on, it doesn't come across very well.
Okay.
So I'd just like to ask to be informed as quickly as we could.
Sure
Or
thing.
to be as much of a part of this as we could be.
Okay, so I'll touch base with the city clerk tomorrow and relay that concern to her. And that connection hopefully should happen.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Mr. Gross, I bet you never thought you'd be involved in anything like this when you came to work for the city. So sorry that you're in the middle of all this, but, Council President Honda and I listened in on a conference call yesterday with elected officials across the nation to hear Janet Napolitano. You were too. So was Councilmember Sefa Dawson. Yeah. Speak about, she was the former head, Department of Homeland Security under Clinton. I hope I have the right title.
You do.
And now she's the president of the University of
University of California.
California, yeah. And, yeah, it's huge. And so we're talking about the different, but two of the things I learned, which I thought we were talking about it with Council President Honda, about that there may be a secondary wave with this virus. So this may be the first wave, but there may be a secondary wave. And I haven't heard that before. And then one other thing she mentioned, which was interesting, was that not only should you be worried about droplets from other people, but feces, because it's apparently carried in the feces. Well, one of the things that I think we should make people aware of as well is that when you use a baby changer in a public restroom, and the baby changing table has been used by another person before them, baby, even if you lay down a blanket on the table, it could pick up that virus. So be careful not to use the changing tables.
Very good point.
It may not, you want to be concerned about a newborn. Okay, and then I would really like to talk about, it's so interesting to me that there's such a desire to pick up TP, bleach, and water. Now, the bleach I understand. The TP I don't get. But the water, I think we just need to have a little quick discussion on that in this community, because water here is not surface water. We don't get our water from this, it's underground, way underground. And it's underground aquifers, and it's brought up, so correct me if I'm wrong, and it's brought up through the pipes to tanks. It's stored in overhead tanks, like over by the Commons Mall. You can see one right up there. Very difficult to get up to do any contamination in that tank. And then it's transmitted back into the ground, and it's also think we're putting chlorine in part of it, that then goes into the home. So it's not, the water is not going to stop flowing. It's not contaminated. So, I never did get the bottled water idea. But anyway, so is there anything else you want to talk about the water part? People are
Well,
so concerned about that.
Is probably what's driving it is the 3 days, 3 ways campaign that has been for years kind of saying, 1 gallon per person per day.
Oh.
So that's probably pushing that a little bit. The other part is, anybody who's looking at preparedness type material, water is so heavily focused on in that material, only because that's in the rules of 3. That's a pretty close one. I mean,
Okay. Yeah, that would be like if there's an earthquake or something that would
Absolutely.
disrupt the flow.
and
Okay, well, I don't think we'll even understand the TP part, but other than that, well, thank you.
you're very welcome.
Is there anything else we should talk about, just to alert our citizens to? I'm really curious to see what the governor is going to say tomorrow night. I know that the president is also talking about some reimbursement for hourly employees that perhaps in restaurants and whatnot, how to be, so that they'll get a full paycheck. And
Correct.
So that would be helpful. And we have a lot of people here in the service industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But as far as other topics, between your questions and comments and this list, I think that gives a good broad base of what's happening here, what we as local government's doing, as well as maybe a couple layers above us. But yeah,
I'm wondering too, if they do have some kind of a reimbursement program for businesses and hourly employees, I believe that would go through unemployment, and there would be a process that they would be able to do that. Maybe we could, once that's explained, maybe we could put that explanation on our website so that people would know and be able to go there. I'm sorry, Council President, did you have another question?
I just had something I've thought about over the last few days. If we have less citizens coming to, let's say, the community center because things are closed down, will our employees, if they don't need to come into work, will they still be covered? Will they still get their pay? How has that been worked out?
I think that concept just kind of surfaced today, so
Okay.
we need to research that a little bit better. But we haven't closed the community center.
Right.
We just closed certain programs.
The at-risk
Right.
program in particular.
Right.
Yeah.
Now that I was told today that, there's definitely fewer people coming to the community center as probably a result of that. But there's still 50% are still coming.
Okay.
and I know legal, HR, and finance are working on the various options of, if it's a sick employee or a person that's just quarantined for whatever reason, on how we can keep them paid.
Okay.
Whether it's, sick leave, paid family leave, or some version of, they report in from wherever they are and they continue to get paid.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Sometimes, you probably already do this, but sometimes there's a pool of sick leave vacation that
Yep.
people can donate to those that don't have any available so that they won't. Yeah, we want to make sure that we take care of our employees, our businesses, and our citizens as best we can.
Absolutely.
And make sure that we take care of each other. All right. Mr. Gross, thank you very much for a very thorough presentation, and I'm pretty sure we're going to be hearing more from you.
Probably. Thank you.
Yeah,
Question.
yes.
Are we going to have a presentation at the council meeting, or is this it? At the regular, next Tuesday?
I can't remember, but I would imagine. Have you been asked?
I have not been asked.
I would imagine it would be in the mayor's, in his discussions, yeah,
Emerging
Yeah.
issues.
yeah. I'm sure that if you haven't been asked, you might be.
Okay.
So, a lot can change in a week. Last week was
That's true.
was amazing to watch and really frightening at times to watch. So,
Yeah, you might want to report on what the governor has to say and what the president has to say,
Yeah,
and
but-
just make sure
Absolutely.
everybody is aware as much as possible. All right, well, thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank
you.
Very much.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Gross. So the next meeting of Public Parks, Recreation, Human Services, Public Safety will be held on April 14th at 5 p.m. God willing, we're all alive and well. All right, and so the meeting is adjourned at 6:20 p.m. Thank you very much.